Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I have a story that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. It's about an unexpected visitor, a strange knock at midnight, and a mystery that was never truly solved. So grab a warm drink, dim the lights, and let's dive into the woman who knocked at midnight. Arthur lived alone in a quiet little house in the countryside. It was a cold winter night, the kind where everything outside was completely still. Snow covered the ground like a soft white blanket, and even the sound of the wind seemed to disappear. Inside, Arthur was sitting in his living room with an old book resting on his lap. A single lamp cast a warm, soft light around him. The only sound was the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. When it struck 12 times, Arthur knew it was exactly midnight. Then he heard it, 3 clear, firm knocks on his front door. Arthur froze. His heart jumped, and for a moment he thought he might have imagined it. Nobody ever came to his house this late. His closest neighbor lived a mile away, and the road outside was quiet and empty. He held his breath and listened, but there was only silence. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe a tree branch scraping the door. Then it came again, knock, knock, knock. This time there was no mistake. Someone was at the door. The knocks weren't frantic, but they had a strange urgency, like whoever was out there really needed to get inside. Arthur felt a shiver run down his back, and it had nothing to do with the cold. Slowly, he stood up and walked toward the hallway. The porch light outside was off, and the house felt darker than usual. Arthur peered through the small frosted glass panel beside the door and saw a figure standing there. It was a woman. She was taller than he expected, her head bowed, and a thin shawl wrapped around her shoulders. He couldn't see her face clearly, just the outline of her body against the moonlight. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to be careful. But then he heard a soft, weak sound, like a faint groan or sigh. His worry mixed with a feeling of responsibility, and against his better judgment, he slowly unlocked the door and opened it just a little. A blast of icy air rushed into the house. Standing on the porch was a woman who looked as if she had been walking for miles through the cold. Her skin was pale, almost unnaturally pale, and her dark hair fell in messy strands around her face. When she lifted her head and looked at Arthur, her eyes were a striking, bright blue filled with exhaustion and something he couldn't quite name. She seemed young, maybe around 30 years old. Her clothes were simple but seemed like they had once been expensive. Now they were covered in a fine layer of dust or ash, and her boots were muddy. "Please," she said softly, her voice rough and tired. "I just need to get out of the cold. Just for a moment." Arthur stared at her, completely shocked. He looked past her into the empty road and silent fields. There was no car, no other person, no sign of anything at all. Just her. Alone. At midnight. "Are you all right? What happened to you?" Arthur asked, his voice sounding loud in the quiet night. The woman shook her head slowly, her shoulders trembling. I lost my way," she said weakly. "The cold is unforgiving tonight." Her eyes moved quickly, glancing into the warm light of Arthur's house, then back toward the dark woods at the edge of his property. There was something strange in her expression, fear, or maybe deep sadness. Arthur hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. "Come in," he said gently. "You must be freezing." She walked inside, bringing with her a faint smell of pine trees and something metallic, like wet iron. She didn't step further than the entryway. Instead, she stood still, clutching her shawl tightly and looking around the room as if she were making sure no one else was there. Arthur tried to be polite, even though he felt uneasy. "Would you like some tea? Coffee? Maybe a blanket?" The woman shook her head. "No, thank you," she said softly. "This is enough. Just the warmth." She took a deep, shaky breath, but her hands didn't loosen their grip on the shawl. Arthur sat down on the edge of a chair, watching her carefully. "You said you lost your way," he asked. "Where are you coming from?" The woman turned her head slowly to look at him. A faint, almost sad smile appeared on her lips. "From far away," she said. "And I need to go even further." She paused for a moment, then added, "You have kind eyes, Arthur." Arthur froze. He hadn't told her his name. "How do you know my name?" he asked, his voice tight with surprise. Her smile stayed the same. It's a small town. People talk, she said calmly. And your mailbox clearly says A. Peterson. She gestured vaguely toward the front of the house. Arthur felt slightly embarrassed. That explanation seemed reasonable, but something about it still didn't sit right with him. For the next 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the fireplace. The woman didn't sit down. She just stood there, her gaze flicking toward the window every so often, as if she were watching for something, or someone. Arthur finally gathered his courage to ask another question. But before he could speak, the woman suddenly turned and moved quickly toward the door. "Wait," Arthur said, standing up in alarm. "Where are you going? It's the middle of the night, and it's freezing out there." She opened the door, and a rush of cold air filled the house. For a brief moment, she looked back at Arthur. There was desperation in her eyes, but also determination. "I must go," she said quietly. "They're closer than I thought." Before Arthur could even ask what she meant, she stepped outside and disappeared into the darkness. Arthur ran to the door and looked out. There were no footprints in the fresh snow. No sound of footsteps. No sign of her at all. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. He stood there for a long time, the cold biting through his skin, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Finally, he closed the door, locked it, and sat back down, feeling completely shaken. The next morning, while making his tea, Arthur saw something strange. On the armrest of his old chair, where the woman had never even sat, lay a small silver locket. It was old and beautifully detailed, but completely empty inside. No photo. No name. Nothing. When Arthur picked it up, it was icy cold and carried that same faint metallic smell the woman had brought with her. Arthur kept the locket. And every time the clock strikes midnight, he finds himself staring at the door, wondering who she really was and what, or who, she was running from that night. So, here are 10 daily use sentences/phrases taken from your story, along with simple meanings that you can use in everyday life. Grab a warm drink. Meaning, take a hot drink like tea, coffee, or cocoa to relax or get warm. My heart jumped. Meaning, felt sudden fear, surprise, or shock. Hold your breath. Meaning, stay very still or wait nervously for something to happen. Against my better judgment. Meaning, doing something even though you feel it might be wrong or risky. You must be freezing. Meaning, you must be very cold. Make yourself comfortable. Meaning, relax and feel at home. Sit right with me. Meaning, feels okay or comfortable to you, often used in negative form. Gather your courage. Meaning, build up the bravery to do something scary or difficult. Disappear into thin air. Meaning, to vanish suddenly and completely. Trying to make sense of it. Meaning, trying to understand something confusing or strange. And that's the story of the woman who knocked at midnight. What do you think happened to her? Was she simply lost, or was there something much darker going on? Let me know your theories in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next mysterious tale.